the larger phenomenon of industrialism, a self-propelling process creating larger and larger industries to satisfy the insatiable demand for cheap consumer goods and profits. Since it has a built-in momentum of its own, it renders men and women largely powerless and passive, and hence represents a modern and insidious form of slavery, the more dangerous because of its meretricious charms, which are greedily seized. It mistakes material comfort for progress, constant motion for purposeful movement, restlessness for vitality and dynamism, speed for efficiency, and consumerism for an improved quality of life. From Gandhi's point of view, the Western path of modernization is a fundamentally alienating and unstable one. It is materialistic, exploitative of nature and human beings, unrestrained and lacking a sense of direction and moral purpose. It is this industrial momentum that Gandhi identified as the primary source of imperial ambition. Unlike some of his contemporaries, Gandhi did not identify the root causes of modern imperialism in exaggerated notions of national glory, but rather in the mode of social production. It is this drive for ever-increased production designed to meet the needs of ever-expanding consumption and the ruthless competition that accompanies the process that impels the system to seek colonial possessions which can be economically exploited as a source both of raw materials and of markets. Quote, "They, the English, hold whatever dominions they have for the sake of their commerce. Their army and their navy are intended to protect it. The English entered India largely for the purposes of trade. They wish to convert the whole world into a vast market for their goods. They will leave no stone unturned to reach that goal." End of quote. Gandhi's argument here is applied to the social and technological process of industrialism rather than to a specific economic form of such a process, such as capitalism. From Gandhi's viewpoint, both modern capitalism and modern socialism are characterized by the industrial system, which he sees as alienating and exploitative. The mere socialization of industry will not fundamentally alter or mitigate such exploitation. And Gandhi quotes Pandit Nehru, a colleague and then the first Prime Minister of India. He says, "Jawaharlal Nehru wants industrialization because he thinks that if it is socialized, it would be free from the evils of capitalism. My own view is that the evils are inherent in industrialism and no amount of socialization can eradicate them." Even though the analysis of industrialism and imperialism is couched in economic terms, the fundamental source of their evils is seen in moral terms and is placed in modern materialism. We might get a better idea of Gandhi's position when we see his alternative and especially moral definition of civilization. Quote, "Civilization is that mode of conduct which points out to man the path of duty. Performance of duty and observance of morality are convertible terms. To observe morality is to attain mastery over our mind and our passions. So doing, we know ourselves. Civilization essentially means good conduct." End of quote. Gandhi's idea of civilization is essentially a dharmic one, where dharma connotes a fixed position of duty and right, that which gives cohesion to and holds together all of life. From this may be derived the idea of mutual responsibility and reciprocity. Just as one is upheld by the natural and human orders of life in terms of sustenance and nurture, both physical and cultural, so also one has the obligation to sustain and enhance these orders of existence. By contrast, modern Western civilization, as Gandhi sees it, is driven by the imperatives of industrialism, according to which human beings are seen primarily as consumers, driven by greed and self-indulgence, propensities which the market both encourages and exploits. Thus, any idea of moral self-rule and self-control on the one hand, and responsibility and concern for one's fellow humans and for nature on the other, is vitiated by the relentless pursuit of material satisfaction. Lost in the process is the sense of moral restraint and direction provided by ethical living. It is the lineaments of that ethical living, both personal and social, that I will now spell out by analyzing three of Gandhi's key moral concepts. So this second section is called Gandhi's Moral Universe. Gandhi is a moralist through and through, and yet it is difficult to write philosophically about his ethics. This is because Gandhi is fundamentally concerned with practice rather than with theory or abstract thought, and such philosophy as he used was meant to reveal its truth in the crucible of experience. Hence the subtitle of his important autobiography, The Story of My Experiments in Truth. The experiments refer to the fact that the truth of concepts, values, and ideals is fulfilled only in practice. Prior to that practical fulfillment, these ideals remain spectral and abstract. Furthermore, Gandhi's ideas are inextricably tied up with his religion, which itself is unconventional. Though an avowed Hindu, he was a Hindu in a philosophical rather than a sectarian sense, and there was much Hindu ritual and practice that he subjected to critique. In accordance with his religio-philosophical ideal, his religion could be described as the life of the self with a small s, attempting to realize itself as self with a large S, and thus achieving moksha or spiritual liberation. But karma yogi that he was, self-realization had to be expressed for him through work in the world and the details of daily life rather than through renunciation of the world. Gandhi's own ethics have a decidedly spiritual cast, but because he takes pains to express them in a neutral philosophical manner, he intends them to have general validity. Thus, when he switches from affirming that God is truth to saying that truth is God, his rationale is that the latter statement, namely that truth is God, is a more general statement which has resonance even for non-believers. Quote, God is truth, but God is also many other things. That is why I prefer to say that truth is God. You may simply worship what you find to be the truth, for truth is always known relatively. Only remember that truth is one of the many qualities that we name about God. It is the living embodiment of God. It is the only life, and I identify truth with the fullest life, and that is how it becomes a concrete thing, for God is his whole creation, the whole existence, and the service of all that exists. This statement is a testament to Gandhi's innate sense of tolerance and inclusiveness, in that he believes that his ideals of truth and nonviolence are accessible even to those who do not share his religious metaphysics. With these prefatory remarks, I shall briefly analyze and comment on three of Gandhi's key ethical concepts, starting first with the idea of truth. Truth for Gandhi is not merely or even primarily the property of statements, though Gandhi does not deny the importance of factual truth or the correspondence between propositions and states of affairs in the world that either confirm or refute them. Rather, his multifaceted notion of truth emphasizes ontological, moral, and existential aspects. Ontologically, satya, truth, which is the Sanskrit word for truth, is derived from sat, the self-existent essence, both the is and the ought of reality. It was this derivation that led Gandhi often to say, nothing exists in reality except truth. Everything else is illusion. End of quote. Beyond the illusory, temporary flux of phenomena lies the eternal truth, what Gandhi also called the absolute truth. We humans, however, with our finite capacities, can have access only to relative truth, an assertion Gandhi uses to justify epistemological humility, and tolerance. All our perceptions of truth are inevitably partial, and therefore claims of cognitive absoluteness are both unwarranted and dangerous. While the ontological aspect of truth points to a more objective notion, the moral and existential aspects move in the direction of a more subjective, almost Kierkegaardian notion of truth as subjectivity, the deeply personal intuition of truth which can be experienced only through action. Raghavan Iyer brings out the duality between the subjective and objective aspects of truth. Quote, Gandhi could not regard truth either as solely the object of reason or as simply the product of human decision. For him, truth is nothing less than the splendor of reality and cannot be gained without an understanding of the eternal law of nature. But when it is perceived and seized, it must be acted on. It is this sense of truth. In this sense, truth must be both discovered and created, found and enacted. In this activist view of truth, it is not enough for thought to be based upon truth. The life of the thinker must express it, must represent it visibly in his or her actions. As already intimated, this idea of truth for Gandhi found its fullest expression in the field of politics, which in accordance with his moral outlook, he regarded as the arena for doing good on the largest possible scale. The idea that Gandhi used to encapsulate this moral conception of politics was satyagraha, or truth force. This was conceived as a practical experiment to introduce truth and nonviolence into the political field. Gandhi adopted this idea early in his political career when he chose satyagraha as the name for his resistance movement against the repressive South African government. Explaining his decision, Gandhi wrote, quote, truth implies love and firmness. That's what the word agraha means in Sanskrit, firmness, and therefore stands as a synonym for force. I thus began to call the Indian movement satyagraha, that is to say, the force which is born of truth and the love of nonviolence. End of quote. The forceful and activist character of satyagraha should correct a common misperception, namely that it denotes a passivity of resistance, a mere turning of the other cheek. Although Gandhi insisted that violence be met with love and understanding, the non-violent means chosen should not obscure the powerful end, namely that of establishing justice and truth. In fact, he's on record as saying that if the only choice were between the passive acceptance of injustice on the one hand and violent resistance to it on the other, he would choose violent resistance. He was convinced, however, that there was a third alternative, namely nonviolent resistance, that was superior to both alternatives. Satyagraha begins with reasoning with one's opponent or adversary in an attempt to arrive at a just solution, recognizing that no party has a monopoly on the truth or is wholly in the right. The purpose, therefore, is to work out a rational compromise that will be agreeable to both sides. It is only when such processes of reasoning, persuasion, and compromise have been tried and have proved unsuccessful that one adopts the direct action techniques of satyagraha. Here, satyagraha involves performing actions such as non-cooperation, that is, strikes, boycotts, lockouts, and fasts, civil